For about 100 years, almost everyone wanted the same job. It paid more. It came with a better title, and it meant that, finally, you were being taken seriously. It was the reward you got for being good at your work, and the job was easy to name. You became the manager, the boss. For generations, climbing toward that chair was just what a career was. So here's something strange. More and more people look at that job today and quietly say, no thanks. Not that they can't get it, they just don't want it. In 2024, the trend even picked up a name: conscious unbossing. In one survey of young professionals, more than half said they had zero interest in becoming a middle manager. Nearly 3/4 said they'd rather move up on their own, without managing anyone at all. This isn't a story about a lazy generation. It's a story about a deal. A quiet, unspoken agreement between workers and companies about what your ambition was supposed to buy you. And that deal has fallen apart. Once you see how, you'll start noticing the same broken machinery almost everywhere you look. To understand why people are walking away from it now, you have to understand why, for so long, they ran toward it. For most of the 20th century, a company was a pyramid, and the logic was beautifully simple. The higher you climbed, the more people you managed, and the more you got paid for it. Your own skill could only take you so far. An engineer, an accountant, a salesperson, each one hit a ceiling on what they could earn doing the work itself. But management had no ceiling. So to break through it, you stopped being the person who did the work, and you became the person who ran the people who did. The path was obvious, and it was the same for almost everyone. You got good at something, and your reward for being good at it was a promotion out of it. The bigger office, the raise, those weren't really perks. They were the scoreboard, proof you were winning. For decades, the trade made total sense. Becoming the boss wasn't one option among many. It was the whole point of showing up. But the deal had a flaw right from the start. It just took decades for anyone to say it out loud. In 1969, a writer named Lawrence Peter put it as a joke. In any hierarchy, he said, people get promoted for being good at their job again and again until they finally land in a job they're bad at. And there, they stop. He called it the Peter Principle. Given enough time, almost every role ends up filled by someone not quite able to do it. For years, it was treated as office comedy, the kind of thing you pin to a cubicle wall and laugh at. Then, in 2019, 3 economists decided to actually test it. They tracked around 40,000 salespeople across more than 100 companies. And the joke turned out to be real. The best salespeople were the most likely to be promoted into management. And once they were, they tended to become worse managers, dragging down the very teams they were now supposed to lead. Gallup studied the same problem from a different angle. Their estimate: companies pick the wrong person for the manager's job about 82% of the time. And the reason is obvious. The second you say it out loud. The skills that make a brilliant engineer or a relentless closer have almost nothing to do with the skills that make a good manager. One is about mastering your own work, the other is about multiplying everyone else's. We built an entire idea of success around this. Take someone great at one thing and reward them with a completely different thing. Then act surprised when it doesn't work. The deal was always a little broken. We just couldn't see it, because the rewards were big enough to hide the cracks. So let's talk about what changed. Because the deal didn't collapse all at once. It came apart in 4 cracks. Watch them stack up. Crack 1, the money. Companies started fighting over specialists, engineers, designers, data scientists, top salespeople. And to keep them, they had to pay them more, whether or not they ever managed a single soul. So they built new pay scales, ones that let you climb and keep climbing entirely on your own. And the gap between a senior specialist and the manager above them didn't just shrink. At the top, it closed. Look at Google's public pay data. A staff engineer who runs no team and manages no one earns a median package of around $580,000. The engineering manager at the exact same level, around $590,000, basically identical. So the oldest reason anyone ever said yes to management, that it was the only way to earn more, just stopped being true. Crack 2. The job got heavier. For years now, companies have been flattening. deliberately stripping out layers of management to cut costs, and the managers left standing got handed bigger teams with thinner support. At small and mid-sized firms, the number of people reporting to a single manager roughly doubled in 5 years, from about 3 to around 6, and the modern manager slowly became something else, a shock absorber, the person who delivers the layoff they didn't decide, who enforces the return-to-office policy they didn't write, who soaks up the frustration from below while taking the pressure from above. You get the title, and you spend your days getting squeezed from both sides at once. Crack 3, this one's quiet, and it might be the most important. As the responsibility went up, the actual power went down. A manager's on the hook for the team's results, but often can't set anyone's pay, can't easily hire or fire, and spends the day trapped inside a cage of metrics, dashboards, and approvals. They carry the blame for outcomes they don't really control. And that exact combination is one of the most dangerous setups in all of work. Back in 1979, a researcher named Robert Karasek showed why. The most damaging job isn't the one with the highest demands, it's the one that pairs heavy demands with almost no control. He called it the high-strain quadrant, and it's still one of the best predictors of burnout we have ever found. Modern middle management sits right inside it. Crack 4. The one that finished the job. For the first time, there was an exit. Companies, especially in tech, built a second ladder, running right alongside the management one, the individual contributor track, titles like staff, principal, distinguished, roles where you gain seniority, influence, and serious money without ever managing a single person. For the entire history of the corporate pyramid, going up had meant becoming a boss. And now? It didn't have to anymore. The one structural reason management used to be unavoidable was gone. So put the 4 cracks together. The rewards fell. The burden rose. The power thinned. And an escape door opened. A reasonable person doesn't need to be talked out of management anymore. They just need to look at the trade honestly. And the people already in the job? They're looking. In one survey, nearly half of all middle managers said they were likely to quit within the year because of stress. For decades, Gallup found that managers were actually more engaged than the people they led. Call it an engagement premium, a quiet perk of the role. In just the last few years, that premium vanished. Manager engagement fell faster than anyone else's, and today, managers report more stress, more sadness, and more loneliness than the employees beneath them. The reward quietly turned into a burden, and everyone can feel it. But here's where it gets worse than personal, because just as fewer people wanted the role, companies started deleting it, on purpose. In a single recent year, middle managers made up almost a third of all layoffs, far more than their share of the workforce. Open management jobs fell by more than 40% from their peak. UPS cut 12,000 management roles in one move. Citigroup squeezed its hierarchy from 13 layers down to 8, and the press gave this one a name too, the Great Flattening. And so a loop begins to spin. The people best equipped to lead are exactly the ones with the best alternatives, so they opt out first, which means more of the managing falls to people who are reluctant, untrained, or simply stuck with it. And that matters more than you'd think. Because of maybe the most striking finding in all of workplace research, Gallup estimates that around 70% of the difference between a thriving team and a miserable one comes down to one single factor: the manager. So when the role gets filled by people who never wanted it and were never supported in it, teams suffer. The work gets worse, and the job looks even more thankless to everyone watching from below. The less people want it, the worse it gets done. And the worse it gets done, the less people want it. But it would be too easy to stop here and call management a trap. Because the same research cuts both ways. Remember that number. Around 70% of the gap between a thriving team and a miserable one traces back to the manager. Read it once, and it sounds like a warning. Read it again. It means a good manager pulls the single biggest lever there is on how a team's work and a team's day actually feels. Almost nothing else inside a company moves 70% of anything. And the bleak version isn't the only one playing out. Some companies are quietly doing the obvious thing, pricing the role for the weight it actually carries, handing real authority back, shrinking teams to a size one human can actually hold. And where that happens, the job stops being a shock absorber and starts being the thing it was always supposed to be. There are other moves, too. In some places, management is no longer a life sentence, but a role you step into for a season, then step back out of. And as software and artificial intelligence quietly swallow the boring half of the job, the scheduling, the reporting, the endless chasing of status updates, what's left can finally narrow down to the part that was always the point: the people. So the picture isn't simply that management is broken, it's sharper than that. The exact same role can sit deep in the high-strain trap or become the highest leverage work in the entire building. What decides which one? Not the title, it's how the deal around it is built, and underneath all of it sits one idea worth carrying with you. For 100 years, we treated management as a reward, the prize you were handed for being excellent at something else. But it was never a reward. It's a job, a distinct, difficult job, with its own rare skills and its own very real costs. We just bolted it onto the top of every career ladder and called it winning. So the real shift isn't that people got lazy or that management went bad. It's that two different things, a reward and a job, were quietly fused into one. And for the first time in a century, they're coming apart again. Once you see that split, you start seeing it everywhere. The brilliant teacher made head of department, the nurse pulled off the floor to manage a rota, the engineer who loved building, now in meetings about building. Sometimes that move is a trap, and sometimes it's exactly where someone does their best work. The shape of the swap is always the same. How it turns out is not. So maybe the question worth keeping isn't whether climbing is good or bad. It's quieter than that. When the next rung appears, for you or for someone you're about to hand it to, is it being offered as a reward for the work behind you, or as a job with the authority and the support the job actually needs? Those are two very different offers. They just tend to arrive wearing the same word. The people rethinking management aren't simply right or wrong. They've just started asking the question out loud. And now, so can you.